Thank you. Good morning, all. Welcome to the July 22nd, 2020 Delta Conservancy Board of Directors meeting. My name is Karen Mitchoff. I'm a supervisor in Contra Costa County. I'm the chair this year. And I'm going to call us to order. I'm not going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. We all been through that a variety of different ways and times. Mr. Campbell, did you want to read the executive order information?
I will. Thank you, Karen. This is our second meeting on the Zoom platform. The executive order reads that board members, staff, and public may participate remotely. The public may observe, provide public comment during the public comment periods, and otherwise observe remotely in accordance with the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. So a few things, staff, board members, and presenters have all been made panelists, so you have the ability to mute and unmute yourselves.
Larry's on.
Good morning, Larry.
Hi, Larry.
So I will go ahead and mute myself.
Thank you. Members of the public are able to provide comment at the appropriate times, and you'll need to do that by raising your hand on the Zoom platform. So you'll want to go to the attendees section, and there's a little hand raising icon. If you do that, the host, James, will recognize you and call on you and unmute you so that you can make your comment. If you've called in, you'll need to press #2 and go through the same process, but note that you might have to unmute your phone line as well. So I think with that, we're going to forego the introductions just because it was.
Oh, well, I want to do roll call, please.
Right, yeah. So, and I think Jessica will actually do a roll call of the voting members and then also recognize any ex officio and or liaison advisors in the meeting.
Good morning. Should I video? So, Supervisor Karen Mitchoff.
Here.
Vice Chair Leo Winternitz. Leo? Leo, are you here?
Here.
There we go. Supervisor Natoli? Not yet. Supervisor Miller?
Here.
Supervisor Thompson?
Here.
Supervisor Provenza? No. Department of Finance,
Supervisor
Matt Almy?
Provenza, sorry.
I'm here.
He's here.
He is here. Let me mark you. Let me change that. Matt Almy for DOF.
I'm here.
Brian Cash.
Here.
Sandy Matsumoto.
Here.
Board Member Rustaller. Larry.
He muted himself. And now he's here.
Board Member Sandoval.
Present.
Is the Assembly Member Grayson here? Senator Dodd. I also like to recognize any liaison advisors that are here. I can see Moira McKinnisby. Are you here? Steve Chappelle.
Here.
Jim Waters.
Here.
From my list, is there somebody I'm missing with liaison advisors?
Jessica, Eric Vink here with the Delta Protection Commission.
Hi, Eric. Sorry, I didn't see you on the list.
No worries.
Do we have any other liaison advisors that have joined us? Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will go to public comment. This is the opportunity for anyone to address us on any item not on today's agenda. There will be an opportunity to address us on agenda items. Is there anyone who wishes to address us on general public comment? I'm not seeing any hands raised, so we will move on to item 4, board elections. Campbell, I'm going to let you handle that one.
Okay, and sorry, just going back to the initial instructions. People can send in comments in email. We're tracking that as well. You can send them to contact@deltaconservancy.ca.gov. So we'll be monitoring those as well as hand raising for any comments. Another opportunity. So for board elections, this is July. We do board elections every year in July by standard, and typically the chair and the vice chair are eligible to serve for 2 full years. This upcoming year would be the second year for both Chair Mitchoff and Vice Chair Winternitz. We like to intentionally try to rotate after 2 years, but again, this would be the second year. I've reached out to both the chair and the vice chair, and they are interested and willing to serve, to continue serving in this capacity into the upcoming year. And so what we would need at this point would be a motion to re-elect the chair and vice chair, or it's an opportunity to provide a motion or nominate anyone else at this point to it. It's an open process. Just love to hear comments.
Jim, are you trying to comment?
I was trying to make a motion to re-elect the chair and vice chair.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dolly.
It was actually Sandy.
Oh, it looked like you.
I was just about to mouth it, but she beat me to it.
Okay, well then it's
This
Sandy.
is the most competitive race we've had. Who gets to second this motion?
Well, wonderful.
Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, is there any further discussion by board members? Seeing none, may we have a roll call vote?
Sure. You want to do a roll
We
call?
have to. We have to
Okay.
do roll call.
You're the boss. Chair
Lord, I
Mitchoff?
wish. Yes.
Vice Chair Winternitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Miller?
Yes.
Supervisor Thompson?
Yes.
Supervisor Provenza? Jim? Are you muted?
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. Board Member Almy?
Yes.
Board Member Cash?
Yes.
Board Member Matsumoto?
Yes.
Board Member Rustaller?
Aye.
Aye. Board Member Sandoval?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, Leo.
Thank you both for your service last year, and we look forward to working with you this coming year.
Thank you. We will move on to item 5, which is our consent calendar. There's one item, which is the May 27th, 2020 board meeting. Any members have any edits or additions to the minutes? Is there anyone in the public who wishes to comment on the minutes? Seeing none, may I have a motion, please?
I'll move.
Leo moves and
Dolly will second.
Dolly will second. All righty. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, ma'am. Supervisor Mitchoff?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Chair Mitchoff. Vice Chair Winternitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Miller?
Yes.
Supervisor Thompson?
Abstain?
Abstain. Supervisor Provenza?
Yes.
Board Member Almy?
Yes.
Board Member Cash?
Yes.
Board Member Matsumoto?
Yes.
Board Member Rustaller?
Aye.
Board Member Sandoval?
Yes.
Motion passes, motion carries.
Thank you. And that's our last action item unless something comes up during the meeting, so we don't have
Correct.
to endure that torture any further. Executive Officers Report, Campbell.
Great, thank you. The hard part's behind us. We've got lots of important updates for you, but no more action items. I'm going to start on a real high note, and I'm going to share a photograph here. This is of young Jacob, the newest extended member of the Delta Conservancy family. Brenda Lusk, our head of administration, gave birth to Jacob on July 11th. And as you can see, that's him with his brothers and sisters, and he's quite healthy and happy and all is well. So we look forward to having Brenda back after maternity leave sometime in November. So that's
We'll give her our congratulations.
well. On a less happy note, we're going to do a bit of an emotional roller coaster here in the beginning. Sadly, we have to say goodbye to Laura Jensen on staff. Laura has been with us for 5 years. You all know Laura as really the architect for our Prop 1 program, as well as initiating the Prop 68 program. It's really hard to imagine those programs and the success they've become without Laura's steady hand in pushing them in the right direction all the time. So we are really going to miss Laura. She's just been a great asset to the Conservancy. She's moving on to become the Deputy Executive Officer of the California Water Commission, which is a great opportunity for her, and I'm certain that she's very well in that position. So Laura, we're all going to miss you, and best of luck. And I know that Laura wanted to just address the board here too. Laura, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thank you, Campbell. Thanks for those kind words, and thank you for the opportunity to address the board. I just want to say thank you to the board. It's been an honor to work with you. And I wanted to say thank you for advancing Prop 1 projects that benefit Delta ecosystems. I'm really proud of what the Prop 1 program has accomplished, and I'm eager to see Prop 68 projects hit the ground. And I just want to offer up that I think that Delta Conservancy is such a gift to the people of California in creating this lasting legacy, not only for the Delta, but for all California citizens. Really, really grateful to have had the opportunity to work here. And I appreciate your service on the Conservancy's board. It's been a pleasure to work with you all. So thank you. Thank you.
Well, Laura, we thank you for your service to our commission and all the work you have done that also will benefit the Delta and all the citizens of California. We all wish you well moving on into your new promotion and position, and know that you will always carry the Delta Conservancy in your heart and do whatever is necessary in your new position to make sure that that we get, I got to be careful here. You'll take care of us and make sure that our voices are always heard, and any opportunities for us to move the Conservancy forward, we know you will handle in the most professional and heartfelt manner. So thank you so much. Is there anyone else who would like to say something to Laura?
Yes. Yes, thank you. Laura, thank you so much for your 5 years of excellent work. It doesn't seem like it's been that long, but time goes by when you're having fun. You did a fantastic job on both of those programs, and really made things run efficiently and fairly, and you will very much be missed by all of us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. Is there anyone else?
Okay.
I'd like to echo those comments also, Laura. Getting Prop 1 off the ground when you started with us and having it evolve application session after application session, and having those proposals just get better and better every year, I think speaks to your ability to both create a project and help us create lasting ecosystem awareness, and I just wish you well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dolly. Sandy, did you wish to make some comments?
Yeah, so I've had the pleasure of knowing Laura for quite a while, and I've seen many steps in her career, and this is just such a nice next step for her and for the water community in California. So I want to say congratulations and thank you, and also for the work that you've done to really institutionalize within the Delta Conservancy the program. You know, I mean, the programs can often be built on a person, and I think you've done the work to really make it a steady transition and to leave the Delta Conservancy in a really good position by working with the team. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you, Sandy. When do you start your new position?
I start on Monday. I've got,
Why?
yeah.
No rest for the weary, or as they say. All righty. Well, with that, Campbell, would you like to introduce Dr. Rachel Wigginton?
I will. So moving back to the happier side, we want to introduce Dr. Rachel Wigginton, excuse me. She's our newly hired senior environmental scientist. She's going to be applying her expertise through all of our programs and representing the Conservancy and the Delta science community. She's a transplant from Kentucky, but she's done all of her graduate work on aquatic ecosystems and in conservation. And before coming to the Conservancy, she was working with San Francisco Bay Delta Bay Conservation and Development Commission, BCDC, and she was leading their effort to update the Sassoon Marsh Protection Plan and Local Protection Program. So not only is she well versed in all of our aquatic systems in the Delta and Sassoon, but she's also well versed in planning processes and how much fun they can be in our region. So we're delighted to have her. She's been on with us since July 6th. She's really hit the ground running, and she's going to be a great addition.
Now, I don't see her on my panel. Is she participating?
She is. Say quick hi.
Hello. I'm very excited to
There you are.
virtually meet everyone. Hello.
Hello. Well, we always welcome you and hope you like your new office there, making sure you have all the new furniture and all the accoutrements that you need to do your work. So thank you so much. Okay, so it's our birthday.
It is our birthday, and it's the Conservancy's 10-year anniversary. So it's exciting. I'm a little embarrassed to say that this anniversary snuck up on me, and it wasn't until I read Jessica Pearson's 10-year blog about the Stewardship Council that it dawned on me that we're the same age. So, you know, what you have here is just a really quick synopsis. You know, obviously, we were created by part of the Delta Reform Act in 2009. Staff came on in early 2010. The first board meeting was in March of 2010, and we've come a long way since then. Obviously, we've got the Prop 1 program up and running now with 29 projects affecting over 8,000 acres. We've got Prop 68 coming online, entertaining 10 projects that will hopefully have significant effect on the economic viability in the Delta and moving forward. We've been heavily engaged and led several important planning processes where we've welcomed the Delta community into that planning environment and tried to fundamentally incorporate their perspectives. We've had several other programs, including our work on carbon that we're going to talk about later today, trying to develop significant economic and market incentives in the Delta. So I think in general, we have fulfilled our purpose of being a state partner to the Delta community and developing a relationship. And I think that there's really nothing that we can't achieve, provided that we have resources to achieve it. We've proven the model that working closely with the community works well. And so kudos to all of us. I personally want to thank all the current and past board members for all your support and effort, as well as all the staff, current and past. And here's to another 10 years, and let's all keep up the good work.
Well, thank you. And I won't lead you all in a rendition of happy birthday to us. All right, moving on to COVID-19 update.
Okay, so just a brief update. We all continue to work from home 100% with very infrequent visits to the office. We catalog all of our visits to the office for tracking purposes if there's ever an issue. This is our expectation for the foreseeable future. What we're hearing is that this is how it will be until there is a vaccine developed. So until we hear anything different, that's our operating orders, and we'll keep you informed about that. The office is technically open, but we don't really have anybody there as a presence simply because we don't get any foot traffic into our office. It's just all for meetings, which are all virtual these days. So we are currently developing procedures because we will have to do some site visits in the near term. So we want to make sure staff has the equipment they need, they're safe and appropriately distancing, and we can accomplish that objective. And also want to recognize Larry Hughes on our staff. I may have mentioned this at the last board meeting, but he has volunteered to be a contact tracer. He's gone through training, and he should be deployed at any point, and that deployment will be for up to 6 months. And Larry has just accepted this position with enthusiasm, and so we really appreciate his willingness to perform this task on behalf of all of us in the state. So appreciate that. I do want to just on another note on this, just say that this has been a hard transition. Staff has done a fantastic job of shifting us from 100% work from home. But as this process wears on, and particularly with the expectation of schools being closed in the fall, it is a challenge, and particularly for our staff that have young kids at home and are trying to parent and work at the same time, and that's going to continue. So Deborah's going to talk about the implementation plan. There's clearly places in there where COVID has an effect on schedule, but I just want everybody to realize that we're trying to be as flexible as we can. We're trying to prioritize, focus on the high priorities, but also recognize that there are things that we're going to struggle to get done. So just want to make sure you all are aware of that as well. Any questions on that?
Yes, Campbell, I have a question about Larry and the contact tracer.
Yes.
Is that the contact tracer that we read about in the newspaper that counties are employing and will help people who are identified COVID positive who they have come into contact with, or is that within our own office? So can you?
No, I'm sorry. Yes, absolutely. So that is statewide. So
Okay.
The governor requested that 10,000 contact tracers be dedicated from state service, and the resources agency really stepped up, and Larry is our they asked for 5%. So actually Larry is our 7% because one person on our team is 7%.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And thank you from the county's perspective, because we really need those tracers. I'm on a call thrice a week, and just learned this morning of a major outbreak in an area of our county. So it is so critical. Thank you, Larry.
Okay, so next I wanted to just do one quick update on contracts. We talked a little bit about this at the last board meeting when we talked about end of year spending, but we are augmenting the contract for technical support on the Delta Carbon and subsidence work. Essentially what this means is we're adding $80,000 to add 2 additional pilot projects to the scope. The original scope was to support 3 projects, and those were the 3 projects that we did with the Department of Water Resources that I'm going to talk in detail about the carbon work, but that we got through carbon estimation and third-party validation and certification of those carbon credits. We're looking at doing 2 more projects. We're working with 2 separate landowners to do that. So this is augmenting that contract to allow that capability to support that process. The contract is currently at Department of General Services, and we anticipate it'll be executed hopefully very soon. Any questions on that? And you're going to hear a lot more about carbon and those projects later on in the agenda. Okay, so moving on to program updates, and I'll try to make this really quick. The Nutria update that you have in the packet has, we had the monthly meeting on Nutria is actually the Monday before our board meeting, and actually it was canceled today, this Monday, but they did provide a new update, and that update showed that there have been 1,572 Nutria taken, which is about 170 more than the update that was in your packet. So you're still seeing steady decline, but reasonable decline. It's not on the exponential inflection. We haven't hit that exponential inflection, which is good. So I think we're all feeling pretty good about the program and how it's working. We've been promising you a full update on the Nutria program. We were hoping to do that when we were all back together. Clearly, that's not going to happen for a while. So at the October meeting, we will definitely bring I'm sorry, I just blanked on her name, the program director for the California Fish and Wildlife Department of Fish and Wildlife. She'll come in and do a full overview of the program for you all at the October meeting.
So I have a question, Campbell.
Sure.
So is that on the agenda item is the Nutria update? Are we still getting, are we getting more into specifics on that a little bit later on, or does this, what you just said, constitute the update?
Yeah, really for today, what I just mentioned, as well as the update that's actually in the board packet that shows all the number of trapping, the cameras, and all the information, that is our update for today. In October, we'll have a more.
All right. Then I'd like to request something. I read through that. There are a lot of numbers and everything looks real positive. There are a lot of Nutria being trapped and all, but my question is, what does that mean? In terms of population, is it increasing, decreasing, staying the same? What can you tell us, or DFW tell us about the success of this program?
Yeah, well, that will absolutely be the major focus of our meeting in October. What I can tell you, not as a wildlife biologist, is that it's encouraging that we're not seeing really high rates of growth. What we've seen is a fairly steady rate of growth on the order of in total since April of last year, we've captured 1,572. If you divide that by the number of months, you're seeing 100 to 200 per month increase, which everybody seems to agree is reasonable. There is an inflection point where things would go exponential if not for the control. So it would indicate that the control to date has helped us prevent getting to that point where we would lose control of the population. But I think the wildlife biologists will be able to say that a lot more eloquently in October.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Wanted to report on the Welcome to the Delta signs. At the last board meeting, we had a rich discussion about the challenges that we were having getting encroachment permits approved through Caltrans to place those signs. We talked about working through our ex officio members, Assemblyman Grayson's office. We had a conversation with Assemblyman Grayson's staff, and they had a conversation with Caltrans, and then we had a subsequent conversation with Caltrans at the staff level. The summary is that the signs that we've produced to date simply don't conform to the standards that are set by the Federal Highway Administration for these types of signs. So Caltrans suggested some alternative approaches to the design that might work. We're looking at some alternative design approaches that might work that we would want to take back to the task force. But there's also the issue that the natural heritage area has now been approved. And one of the key issues about a natural heritage area is you want to sign it to recognize it so that you get the benefit of it being a natural heritage area. So the DPC is starting the planning for the NHA, developing the management plan, which is the first step. And that will undoubtedly come out with a signage plan. So two approaches here. We're thinking about continuing to look at designs, see if we can place these welcome signs in a way that meets all objectives, and then have the ability to append those signs, add on when the natural heritage area signage is available. Or conversely, we could wait until the natural heritage area planning is done and then do it all at one time. So we're kicking around these ideas. I think, for the benefit of the Delta, we'd like to get something up sooner than later. But we'll continue to work through these ideas and keep you all aware of where we think we're headed and get your input. And welcome your input at this point as well.
I'm not seeing anyone. Would anyone like to comment on this? My only comment is, how long will it take to get all that work done by the National Heritage group? We could be waiting a long, long time. So,
yeah, I think Eric, I don't know, Eric, if you want to speak to that right now. I know Eric's going to give us an update later on in the agenda too. Do you have a rough sense, Eric?
Well, it will take a while to complete the management plan, but that shouldn't preclude us from putting up signage at any time. If we can agree on the, what we want to present, and more importantly, the logo that will attach to that. So if I understood your question correctly, Chair Mitchoff.
Yeah, Eric, thank you. So do you think there'd be some ability to get signs up like in 6 months, 12 months? What kind of time frame do you think we're looking at?
I think it probably depends on working through the Caltrans process, because we're in their right of way. So, I mean, I think between us and the Conservancy, we could come to agreement promptly on what the signs would say and how they would look. And then it's just a question of clearing it through the Caltrans standards.
Well, let me know. Our executive director of our transportation authority is a former Caltrans director, and so and I'm sure Assembly Member Grayson. So perhaps when the signage has been designed, I'm sorry to be so cynical, folks, but I'm just going to assume there's going to be a hang up with Caltrans. So let us know so we can perhaps work some of our contacts behind the scenes to get that going. Happy to help. I'm sure my colleagues are too.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, in light of time, maybe I'll just ask if there were any questions about the board directives and responses. There were 4, but they're pretty straightforward.
Looks like that. I'm not seeing anybody saying anything.
Okay,
Oh.
well, then that concludes the program update. I'm going to transfer over to Jessica to run through the budget update at this point.
Thank you. Good morning, Jessica.
Hi there. Again, as a board liaison, I wanted to welcome Assemblymember Grayson to the meeting. There's one hat taken care of, and here's my second one. James, can you put up the slide for 6.3? Ah, there we go. So you might notice that our budget and expenditure report looks a little different this month because it is our first 2021 budget report. So we currently, since it starts in July 1st and the year end is not closed for the state, we have no expenditures posted today for July. So you just want to take a quick look. Everything's similar to our 1920 budget. Just wanted to throw out a few things I noticed as the budget progressed. First of all, our temporary help, that is our retired annuitant and contact tracing. It's a little bit more than last year. We're covering 6 months of his salary for that. One thing I noticed that was interesting is our grants item, budget item is a 0. Don't worry, there's plenty of money there for grants. Good. We were funded with Prop 1 in 17-18, 18-19, and the bulk of it in 19-20. So all the funding has been appropriated. We have 3 years to encumber, 2 years to spend that money. So we will be pulling from the pool in those years. So, and still plenty there to spend. Our reimbursements line, you'll notice at the bottom on line 37 is basically some state and federal contracts that we are working on, reimbursement contracts that we have with a variety of agencies. And anyone want to take a look? Anyone have any questions about the budget?
The reimbursement, is that just from the 1920 year? We're expecting some funding to come in?
No, we have state and federal contracts to do different work. That work being like some U.S. some work with
That's
the Arundo and.
I got it.
Yeah.
We're spending that money.
This year.
Red should have been my first clue. Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We will be receiving those monies.
And is the travel COVID adjusted, or is that travel based on normal travel?
Our travel hasn't changed too much. A lot of the travel is mostly from when we go to site visits and stuff. So most of that hopefully will remain the same when we develop some procedures to go to site visits. That travel will mostly pick up there.
I think the expectation there is that will what we do throughout the course of the year. So we budget and then pull out as not needed. So that's probably a pot that we will be ultimately pulling money from and putting in other locations if we don't resume normal at some point soon.
Yeah, it's slightly less than last year, about 1,000.
And then I'm assuming the whatever overhead remains, we're not getting a break on not using the offices at all.
No.
Nope, still paying rent.
Still paying rent. And I think
on a big empty space.
On a big empty space.
Yep, my colleagues on the boards of supervisors understand rent moratoriums, one of our hottest items. Any other questions of Jessica?
Thanks.
All righty, we'll go back to, there we go, seeing everybody's happy face. All righty, and so that ends item 6. We'll move.
Do we need to ask for public comment on?
Oh, thank you, Nicole. So or whoever said that. Is there any public comment on the report? Seeing none. Thank you again. Moving on to item 7, which is the Proposition 1 update from Aaron.
Good morning.
Good
Yep,
morning.
This is the standard Proposition 1 program update as usual. Gonna sort of do a quick review of many of the grants. I'm gonna take them in reverse chronological order, as I like to say. So starting with cycle 4 and then cycle 3 and 2 and 1. I have highlighted a few projects that I think are worthy of attention at the moment for various reasons that we'll get into. But if there are projects that I gloss over that anyone has a question about or is curious about, wants more information about, by all means, interrupt me and we can talk about any one of these guys. So to get started, starting with cycle 4 here, the first comment that I have is actually there is an error, but this is a happy error. In the heading of cycle 4, it says that 3 grant agreements have been executed and staff is working on 7 others. And since the preparation of this material, we've executed a 4th one. So we're working on 6. And that project is actually it's on page 2 in the middle, the Elk Slough Fish Passage and Flood Improvement Planning Project. So that is now up and running. Other than that, cycle 4 is cranking along. You know, we have a pretty solid timeline for executing the remaining grants, and so everyone is progressing forward and not hitting any major impediments. Going back to cycle 3, the first project I comment on and bring your attention to. So on page 5, it is the Three Creeks Parkway Restoration Project number 2. At the last board meeting, I had reported that construction was planned to begin in June of 2020, and that Campbell and Shelley and I would be going down to attend a groundbreaking celebration of the project site. Sort of some good news, some bad news. The good news is that construction has in fact began. It started in June, just as anticipated. However, due to COVID-19 restrictions, the groundbreaking celebration was canceled, and so Campbell and Shelley and I did not attend, sadly. Another project from cycle 3 that I wanted to bring some attention to, again, sort of a good problem to have. This is on page 6 at the top, the Stone Lakes Restoration Project. And we've been in communication with the grantee who had as deliverables, as established deliverables in their grant agreement, design plans at the 35% level and the 65% level. This is a planning project, so designing for an implementation project is what its main goal is. And the grantee has completed both of those design levels at significant savings that they're so under budget that they wanted to add pushing those 65% design plans to the 90% design plan. So we're altering the agreement a little bit to allow for them to get money to push the design plans farther along, which is great. You know, altering grant agreements is always a little bit annoying, but this is the kind of annoying that we want. This makes this grant that much more competitive. It pushes it that much farther towards that implementation project in the future. Mm-hmm. So overall, a good problem to have.
Dolly, did you have a question?
I have a question on before Aaron goes to the cycle 2 projects. If this is a good time, Aaron?
Absolutely.
So on page 4, I think it's page 4. Yes, the restoration planning at River Gardens.
Yes.
So can you explain a little bit more about what's happening with DWR and how we might respond to that? Because you did pique my interest by stating determining how to respond to this complication.
Yes. Determining is an active word because this is very much a developing situation. Okay. So what happened is the River Garden Farms project that we are funding has many components. It's all on the same farm, but there are, I think, 7 or 8 different sites that they had planned to develop plans for. In so doing, and in much of the outreach that they were engaged in, they stumbled upon DWR, who was engaged or is engaged in developing design plans that directly overlap with one of those little sites of our project. So having DWR develop plans for this site and us develop plans for the site didn't seem like a good idea. So we're currently trying to figure out kind of how to move forward. And we're in the process right now of getting a sit-down meeting. This is all fairly new. So we're getting a meeting with DWR and the farm owner and the grantee and us to all discuss kind of priorities and how strongly everyone feels about this project, and if it is appropriate, if there's some way of merging efforts, or is, as seems likely from what I know, it may mean that we have to sort of, one or the other of us or DWR, may have to sort of step back from this project, or at least this component of this project.
Let DWR do it so we can take the money and do something else.
Exactly.
Exactly. And so some of those, there are definitely plans of taking, like I said, there are multiple sites on the farm. So maybe we take the money from this one and we push the other design plans farther along. Right. Or the farm owner has said that there might be another site to sort of substitute for this one. Right. So those are all options when we get there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Definitely.
A quick follow-up.
Yes, go ahead, Leo.
Thank you, Karen. But as far as the restoration the objectives are concerned, they are similar, right? I mean, we're moving towards the same direction.
That is my understanding of DWR's efforts, yes.
Okay, because sometimes you have different restoration projects being planned for, but with very different objectives, which can then affect areas around it. So I just want to make sure that regardless of which selection is made, that the objectives still move us all in the original direction that we had intended to move.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very good point. And I really hope to learn a lot more of exactly what DWR's objectives are once we actually can meet with them and talk to them about it. Because right now, I actually haven't spoken to anyone at DWR directly.
Yeah,
that's what this coming meeting is going to be about.
We don't want to preclude, if DWR does the work, we don't want to preclude we don't want that work to preclude anything else that we might be doing in the area.
Definitely.
Okay, Aaron, you were on page 6, I believe.
Yes, so going back to cycle 2, not much to report here. All 4 of these projects are moving along pretty darn smoothly, with one note being on page 7 in the middle, the restoration for priority wetlands of endangered species at the Casumnas River Preserve project is going to be our first implementation project to close at the end of the year. So that's kind of exciting.
So I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Sure, go ahead, Leo.
Thank you. I think you're talking about restoration priority wetlands, Casumnas, but you also have there all volunteer monitoring activities have been suspended due to COVID restrictions.
Yes.
How does that affect the time schedule, or does it?
It's not really. They had a very strong volunteer corps that was coming out to do a lot of bird monitoring and some tree growth monitoring and some other things, but mostly focused on the bird monitoring. Those volunteers are obviously all having been told to stay home as of, I think, March is when that went into effect. And so there's been they've sort of reduced the schedule of monitoring, but the project staff has taken up some of that slack. So there is monitoring still going on. And luckily, enough of the project had gone past by the time that COVID even arose, that they had a really great baseline and then even post-implementation data to kind of show some of the story of what was going on with things like birds in response to the habitat implementation that they did.
Great, thank you, Aaron.
Definitely.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Going backwards then to cycle 1, last couple of comments from me. One is on page 8 in the middle, the Fish-Friendly Farming Certification Program of the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta project is about to close in 9 days that funding term closes. And so this marks the 4th project of ours, our 4th grant to close, which highlights kind of how we're moving more and more into the post-project monitoring phase. We're stepping up our efforts, we're developing our procedures and policies so that we can keep track of these projects as more and more of them close, going out into the future and making sure that they maintain the investment that we've made in these projects. And then the final comment that I have is right below.
Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead, Leo.
I have a question on that as well. Um, I'm glad we've made the progress on that. I'm glad it's ready to close. My question was, I think you touched on it a little bit, is what kind of success indicators do we have as to the accomplishments of that project?
So this has been a planning project, and so one of the goals of the plan was to develop some farm plans, develop some best management practices that farmers could use, in particular focusing on the 10 most widely planted crop types in the Delta. And they've created those things now. So we have those in hand, those best management practices. And currently, the sort of next move is for the grantee to go and start meeting with farmers to get them to enroll in this program and actually adopt those best management practices. And those meetings are starting to happen. That has definitely been an impact from COVID-19. The original goal for this project was that towards the end of the funding term, they'd be going out and meeting with tons of farmers face to face and explaining the benefits of the program and explaining how certification works. And that effort has really been curtailed fairly significantly because of COVID-19 and the inability to actually meet with people.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
But that being said, there is a contract that the Delta Conservancy has with the same grantee to keep on pressing that effort. So they're not giving up on it, even with COVID-19 in place.
And small clarification, that's not yet executed, it is in process.
Good point.
Okay. Thank you.
Definitely. And so the last project that I want to highlight was, again, the Three Creeks project number 1, and just sort of point out that that groundbreaking and beginning of construction that I mentioned up in the Cycle 3 grants also applies to this one. So that's 2 projects that have hit the ground and are now actually moving dirt. And so with that, I would just like to sort of wrap this up by saying the program it feels like it's in a really good place right now, with the grant agreements that we have coming online, getting towards actual execution really smoothly. And a lot of the projects that had faced sort of hangups, especially some of the larger implementation projects we had that were facing various issues, have really cleared those issues and are now moving along. And as I mentioned just now, more and more projects moving into that post-project phase, where now we just sort of get to watch and reap the benefits of all the investments and work that we've done on them. So a big thanks to Laura for getting things as far along this process as she has. And thank you very much.
Thank you,
One
Aaron.
question?
Sure, go ahead. Is that Jim? Is that who I'm hearing?
Yes, thank you.
Here.
Thanks, Aaron, for your good work on this. I agree. We seem to be in a really good place. I just wanted to ask on the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Habitat and Drainage Improvement Project.
Yes.
I assume that past problems with Ducks Unlimited have been resolved and that the project is running smoothly now?
Yeah, so for everyone's reference, this is on page 8 up at the top. Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area Habitat and Drainage Improvement Project. And yes, Ducks Unlimited has secured the additional funding they needed and sort of filled the funding gaps that they had. They've secured the permits they needed, and construction has begun on this project. They are also moving dirt.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you for your report, Aaron. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to comment on his report? Seeing none, we will move on to Robin for the Prop 68 program update.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I was about to start and remembered I had to unmute. Good morning, board members and Chair Mitchoff. And thank you for the opportunity to provide you with an update on the Prop 68 program. I look forward to the day when I'm providing you as much details about projects that we actually have as we go on Prop 1. We're getting there. And I do have a couple of updates that are since this report was posted, but I will share those as I go through it. As I mentioned before, we've received, we've received 11 concept proposals to date, and as I mentioned before, one of those was deemed ineligible under general obligation bond law, and one was deemed to not be a viable project. So we are currently working with actually 3 applicants to assess the viability of proposed projects, and this is one of the updates. 5 applicants to develop full proposals, and one of them is kind of right in the middle of that process. So we are ready to move them to developing a full proposal. We haven't actually met with them yet and confirmed that they would like to do that. So we need to have that meeting before I can officially say that they are developing a full proposal. But the meeting is next week, and in all likelihood, we will then be working with 6 applicants to develop a proposal. We've received 3 new concept proposals since the previous staff update: the Asian American Heritage Park in Isleton, Bees Lake Public Access. So you're probably familiar with the Bees Lake Restoration Project, which is a Prop 1 project. There's a public access component to make that area accessible to the public, and that is what the City of West Sacramento has submitted through Prop 68. So we're still doing the assessment and discussing that, the potential for that project. And then finally, the Pacific Flyway Center, which some of you may be familiar with. It's a very large project in Solano County near Fairfield, and they have submitted a concept proposal for a portion of the phase 1 part of the project. Excuse me.
Robin, I'm going to ask a really silly question. Is Bees Lake named after bees, or is it a family name? Do you know?
Lord. Aaron, do you know the answer to that?
Well, the reason I ask is that there's a bunch of bees there. Why would anybody want to go to a lake where there's a lot of bees?
My guess is that it's not named after bees.
Good.
I do not know that for sure. That's a very interesting question, though, that I would now like to know the answer.
Does Jim Provenza know the answer to that?
No, I don't. I remember I went to a beach once that I named Bees Beach because it was just infested with bees, so I get your point.
I'm going to assume it's not infested with bees. You know, I'm being a little facetious, but I don't want to put money towards something where nobody's going to go. But
we'll try not to endanger the public for sure.
Yeah. I will know the answer to that question by our next meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
And then moving
to the active proposals?
Yes, so moving to the next page, these are all proposals that you were on our last update. They've been moved to the full proposal development process. 6805 is the one I was talking about, that our meeting with the applicant is next week. And I am fairly certain that that is going to actually, that they will want to move it to the full proposal process, in which case that status update would change. The others, we've met with most of them, and there's 2 left, including the Isleton Museum, and they are in the process, they're in various stages of developing a full proposal. I want to note that the total amount requested is likely to change because one of the implementation projects is likely to change to a planning proposal. After we had our meeting, or during our meeting, we kind of all came to the conclusion that they have some planning left to do that we can't really fund through an implementation grant. So their best bet would likely be to come back with a planning concept proposal and finish that part of the project. And then, possibly resubmit then for an implementation grant after that, although that's obviously a separate thing.
Which one was that, Robin? The Isleton?
No, that is the Southport Levee Recreation Trail, the City of West Sacramento. We do have 3 proposals currently in from the City of West Sacramento. So Bees Lake, the Clarksburg Branch Line Trail Planning Grant, and then the Southport Levee Recreation Trail, which is the one that is most likely, based on our meeting last week, going to come back as a planning grant. So the funding request would be significantly less for the planning portion. but again, they have planning work left to do that we can't fund through an implementation grant. It would need to be a separate grant. So that would reduce the total amount requested. But considering that so far we've received funding requests for almost 80% of the total grant funding we have within the first 6 months of the program opening, I don't think we need to be concerned about our ability to get the money out the door. I'm not sure if anybody was concerned about that, but so even with the total coming down some, the program has only been open for 6 months, and we have already received 11 concept proposals, which I'm very pleased about. And I know we have at least one more that they're not ready to submit a concept proposal yet, but they're having discussions, and I feel fairly certain we'll be seeing it within the next couple of months. So that is my update.
Are there any members who wish to have any questions?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have a couple questions.
Sure, go ahead, Dolly.
Thank you. Robin, can you remind me, does the board vote on these proposals, or is this a strictly staff-driven process?
No, the board are the only ones that grant awards for grant money. I'm saying that as a definite in terms of all of our grant funding. I actually don't know that for all of our grant funding, but definitely for Prop 68. We will work with them. We will help them develop full proposals. We will bring recommendations to the board, and then the board will make that decision.
Okay, great. So we're going to do that sometime in the future, because I could not remember that. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we'll take those votes once those full proposals come forward.
Yes.
And we might take one next month and several the month after. They're not all going to be on the same timeline, I suspect.
I suspect not. It is possible. I would not be surprised if there was one on the October meeting. There is a process that needs to happen in order to develop these proposals. So they do take some time, and of course they have to be finalized and ready well before the date of the actual board meeting. But I would not be surprised if there was at least one on the October, and then probably a couple in the January.
Awesome, thank you. And then in terms of the table that you have here before us with I guess identifiers of the project, can you also add either under the project name or maybe a whole column by itself where those projects are located?
So you mean in addition to the county?
That, was it the Pacific Flyway is on the island of... So like the Pacific Flyway, I have no idea where geographically that project is.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll definitely figure out a way that helps identify locations.
Yeah, just so to give us an idea of where the projects that are being submitted to us, just like we do in our Prop 1, we kind of have a general idea of where all those projects that we've granted funding to are going to take place in the Delta.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, if I may, we create a map for Prop 1, and I think maybe what we'll try to do is do a similar map for the concept proposals that just shows polygons and where they're located within the system.
Thank you.
Jim, did you
follow up? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, okay. Dolly, are you finished? Okay, Matt, you had a follow-up question on it. Is that what I'm?
Yeah, building on that, and I'm trying to recall the requirements of Prop 68, but I recall that there were some disadvantaged community requirements as well. I'm curious, kind of building on the specific location, whether there's certain kind of disadvantaged community requirements that we have to comply with, and how these projects fit into that requirement.
So there's two different categories. There are disadvantaged communities. There are severely disadvantaged communities. So the severely is SDAX for short, and the disadvantaged PACs. The Prop 68 requirement in the bond language is that in our chapter that there is a requirement that 20% of our overall funding go to fund projects that serve severely disadvantaged communities. So that is a separate pot of funding. The requirement for, there isn't a specific requirement for projects benefiting DACs other than providing technical assistance, having some way of providing a technical assistance programs to projects that serve DACs. Now that doesn't mean every project that serves a DAC, it requires technical assistance. You know, some of the large jurisdictions submitting projects really require technical assistance, even if the project itself is located serving a DAC. But the SDAC requirement is more, you know, kind of a focus because of that 20% requirement. Honestly, there is a very clear definition of how the bond defines an SDAC in terms of median household income. Pretty much every concept proposal we have gotten in has said they serve an SDAC, and most of them are not using the definition that's in the bond language that we actually have in the grant lines and in the concept proposal template. So we need some, but some of them we know will serve an SDAC. We just need to make sure that we have evidence of that. And so we are, in some of the cases where we know that that's going to be the case, we are working on how to make sure that we have evidence of that. Most, you know, we looked into how other agencies are developing definitions of serving an SDAC, because that part of it is not clearly defined in the bond language. So in general, if a project is located within a mile radius of serving an SDAC, it's pretty clearly serving it as long as the project itself is. And then we take another step of having other opportunities for projects that are physically located outside of an SDAC, but might also still be serving that severely disadvantaged community. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I was just thinking that, you know, as these proposals come, having an indication in the agenda of how each of these projects, whether they kind of check the box, shall we say, in terms of meeting that requirement, might be useful information, was my thought.
We can definitely do that. I would like to do that once they reach the full proposal phase, because as I said, pretty much all of them say that they serve an SDAC when they submit the concept proposal, but they don't necessarily meet the actual requirement.
Yeah, no,
but yes, in the full proposal, we should be clear on that by then.
Jim, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, I wanted to ask about the Clarksburg Schoolhouse and Delta Welcome Center. Is that one location or two?
That is one location. The Clarksburg, the Friends of the 1883 Clarksburg Schoolhouse, that group, had looked, before they submitted the concept proposal, looked into the possibility of also creating a Delta Welcome Center with that building at that site. So the way they're moving forward with the project is that it will also be a welcome center.
Well, that's great. I'm excited about that. I visited that schoolhouse years ago, and it was pretty poor shape, but wonderful location. And there is a lot of history in that schoolhouse, and to also include a welcome center, I think will actually be a great promotion for the Delta.
Yeah. I had a good meeting with them last week on that project. They're a very, very dedicated group of people.
Yeah, it's exciting. Thank you.
Robin, on the revitalization of Pittsburgh Boat Launch Facility and Park, can you email me? I don't want to take any time here. I mean, I know where this is, but I want to know if it's in the marina or if it's a separate location.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, I can definitely email that to you. I can also tell you that the original proposal was included the marina, but because there is a gating issue, we talked to them about just focusing on the park that has full public access to it. So the concept proposal and what they're moving forward with in the full proposal is the park part of it, which is not,
Okay.
it's next to the marina.
Okay. I just have some concerns and issues because they've gotten a lot of money over the years. And there's an article in today's paper, in fact, about something. And I would just like to see more information, knowing how much time staff works on these various issues. And this one, I shouldn't speak against a project in my county, but the rest all look like educational or access to trails or recreational. And this is really a very commercial area. And I have some concerns about that.
I would like to talk to you about that further. They said that there, we of course haven't been able to do a site visit yet. We had one planned for the end of March and obviously it didn't happen. But they said that there is multi-family housing, so low-income housing right next to that park. So this actually, because of that housing, this meets the STAC requirement. But I would be very interested in talking to you about that further. Obviously, the more information we can get, the better.
Well, I'm not going to do a professional site visit, but I'd like to see the map or the drawing, and I'd like to go out there because then you and I can have a better conversation. Maybe Campbell gets involved around that. And I know Assemblymember Grayson is probably still on the line hearing that. He represents that area. Or actually, I guess Assemblymember Frazier may. Anyway, enough about that. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment on Robin's report? Sandy, did I see you?
Yeah, Robin, I have a question, and I'm like way out of my field of expertise, but just curious, especially in these times, is there any organization that's sort of forming the overall historical narrative of the Delta? So, I mean, there's these individual historic sites that are kind of being redeveloped and you know, brought into public access and to create kind of connection to history. And I just wondered are there any connections between these individual sites, or is there any organization that's working to create that kind of connection between those places to kind of tie together these, you know, so it's just not like little spot here and little spot there. And maybe we're too early to do that, but that question came to mind for me.
That's a great question. And there isn't one organization that I know of doing that. We did just have a discussion, and we need to have more of a discussion about the review process for these historical projects and reviewing for historical accuracy and making sure that we have that included in our proposal review process. I don't know if the heritage area site that what DPC is working on will help address what you're talking about or not. I know that there is a Delta Historical Society, but I don't know how big they are and how much, how if they're in a position, you know, or have the capacity to kind of do what you're talking about. That is a really interesting question, and that is the extent of my ability to answer it at the moment.
Well, I appreciate if you collect information, I'd be curious to, I mean, I just think of you know, I come from the ecological perspective, which is like you have a overarching regional restoration vision or plan that kind of connects the individual sites so that it functions as a more holistic thing. And so I just, it may be early again, but as this develops, I'm curious to hear more from you about what you're learning and how these fit together.
I'm wondering if maybe Eric wants to chime in just a little bit on the degree to which he thinks the natural heritage area might sort of play that role.
And perhaps the community action plans as well.
Yeah.
Probably more likely to flow out of the National Heritage Area plan, but I agree with Robin. I don't know of a Delta-wide entity. We have a lot of sub-regional organizations, as you can imagine, in a number of communities and parts of the Delta. But I think something like that might come out of the establishment of the National Heritage Area. It just doesn't exist yet.
Thanks.
Okay, Eric, you were talking. Okay, did you have any other comments or just answering her question? Okay, and so any other raised hands? I don't see anything. Any public comment on this item? Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item 9, which is the Conservancy 2020 implementation plan status by Deborah.
All right, good morning. So just as a reminder of kind of how this process works is we bring an implementation plan to the board for approval in January each year. And then we bring a mid-year status update in July. Now this year we didn't have a board meeting in January, so the initial plan came to you in March. So we're doing an update quickly thereafter, but I think with everything that's going on, it's a good timing for that. And then we will bring you a year-end status when we bring the plan for next year in January. So you get to see this 3 times. So this is our mid-year update. As Campbell mentioned, that, well, let me back up just a little bit, that the implementation plan itself are the tasks and the timelines for the steps we're going to take in this particular calendar year to further the objectives of our 5-year strategic plan. So as Campbell mentioned, we have been 100% teleworking for the last 4 months, and that really did create a quick turn and shift in our operations. And I really want to commend staff for that, you know, turning on a dime and making things happen and keeping the progress going. It's been difficult, and there have been some delays, as you can see in the status on the report itself, but we've really kept them to a minimum. And I think the impact on our stakeholders has been really minimal. We've been able to keep projects moving and being able to serve our stakeholders well. So I won't go into the details of any particular projects, but if you have questions, I'm happy to answer those. You know, we've really been looking to support staff as they continue to work in this challenging situation. And now we're not only working in a COVID situation with the telework and the restrictions that brings, but also in the personal leave program with the reduction in pay with the commensurate time off for staff. And we're encouraging staff to take that time and, you know, protect their well-being personally so that they can continue to be, you know, just great pieces of what we're doing as an organization. So you will probably see some adjustments going forward as we continue to work in these conditions. We think we really can continue to be really effective, but there will be some adjustments, and we appreciate the board's understanding of that. So that's really the overall update that I have. If there's, like I said, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them on any particular projects.
Are there any questions for Deborah and her report? Leo?
Leo, you need to unmute yourself.
Leo, you need to unmute.
I am unmuted.
Now you are.
Yeah. So on the, Deborah, thank you. On the invasive species, a couple of the delays are related to senior environmental scientist position vacant. Is the hiring of Rachel address those issues now?
It certainly does. We are so happy she's here.
Wonderful.
I will note that the white paper that was from the Invasive Species Symposium, because Tomasio Bush was Rachel's predecessor, he actually has taken that project with him for continuity's sake because he was the one that was actually at the symposium. So he and Aaron are working in conjunction to finalize that product. It got a little delayed with the transition and then also with COVID, but we're anticipating that to be wrapped up soon.
Okay, thank you. And I'm glad Rachel has a bunch of work to do.
I'm sure she is too.
And on the pesticide management, PMPs, execution of contract is pending Department of General Services. Can you add some more information? What's that about?
Sure. So that is the contract that Aaron had mentioned when he talked about the fish-friendly farming project for Prop 1. So as that wraps up, this is the second phase of that project to implement projects on the ground on farms. There were variety of reasons why this got delayed. A lot of it had to do with COVID situations and a few other things. And it is pending with the Department of General Services because it is very specialized. We have to get an approval for them for a non-competitive bid contract. There aren't other organizations in the state that are certified to do the fish-friendly farming program. They are the entity, so we have to get approval from Department of General Services, which I'm happy to say that we just received that recently. So that's another happy update, and we're proceeding with getting the contract executed.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments for Deborah? Do we have any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we will move on to item 10. Campbell, you're going to talk about Delta carbon management. You're on mute, Campbell.
We're all going to be professionals at this at some point.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. So I'm excited to do this overview. James, if you could load up that slide deck, please. And I want to thank Supervisor Provenza for suggesting this. It's been a while since we've actually gone through and talked about everything that's going on. It's a very exciting time right now. We're seeing a lot of momentum, so I'm happy to share that with you. Last week in particular, I had 3 separate meetings, and I'll describe those meetings a little later on, that just really illustrate that things are really starting to move here, and we could be really on the verge of something significant. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of background to refresh everybody's memory, and then I'll go through exactly where we're at, and I'll try not to take too long. So next slide, please, James. So this is just a reminder, the area that we're talking about here is sort of the red and the deeper orange color. And this is the area where we're most deeply subsided in the Delta. And we continue to subside at about 1 inch to 1.5 inches per year. And then, of course, we have sea level rise on top of that. These are all very concerning issues because if we lose the Western Delta, the fear is that we would not be able to export water out of the Delta, which would affect the East Bay, all of San Joaquin Valley agriculture, and the LA Basin. And up to 27 million people depend on water out of the Delta in California. So there is a major concern that this subsidence is a real threat to California's economy. You could imagine the effect that an interruption of 36 months would have on our economy. And you could imagine if that were to happen now when we're already facing economic effects of a pandemic. I like to use this map because it's 1995, back from the CalFed era. And since 1995, we are 2 feet deeper than we were as a result of this subsidence. So we continue to go in the wrong direction. Next slide, please, James. So just so everybody knows what subsidence really is, the Delta was 800,000 acres of saturated wetland habitat. And as that wetland grew through time, it basically was putting down layers of peat soil, incredibly rich peat soil, great for agriculture. And so we drain these islands for agriculture. And it's been, a major economic driver for California and just an incredible agricultural region. But to do that, you have to drain the root zone. And that bottom diagram there shows that what you have to do is you cut a tile drain and you pump water out of that drain, and that aerates the root zone. So it allows, you can't grow corn in saturated soil, so it allows you to put air to get the water deep enough so that you can actually grow corn or whatever you're growing. And what that does is that exposes that highly organic carbon, peat soil, to microbial oxidation. And those little microbes get in there and they digest that carbon, and what they're putting out the other end is carbon dioxide. And so that's what's going off into the atmosphere. I always love the picture of the boat in the upper right because it basically shows a boat going up to the Stockton Deepwater Ship Channel, and you can see the bottom draft of that boat is probably about as high or a little bit lower than the top of that trailer. And so again, about 200,000 acres in the Delta are in this condition as a result of subsidence. Next slide. Oh. Can you advance, James? There we go. I talked a little bit earlier about some of the Delta planning efforts that we've led. This was an effort to really look at the central Delta, where there's a lot of public land, and what can we do in these lands. For this process, we brought together the Reclamation District engineers, public landowners, some private landowners, our NGO partners, academics. We really had a great collection of stakeholders in the Delta to really focus on, what is it that we can do in this region? And the number one priority was we've got to stop subsidence. We have to address subsidence. And that is really a sea change from when I started this work 13 or 14 years ago, before I even came to the Delta Conservancy, when I was with the Nature Conservancy. There's a lot more understanding that the economic realities in this region are really stressed, and this is a fundamental threat, and it's an enormous carbon emission, and it really is a high priority that we have to address. Next slide, please, James. So this is my high-tech map in my office. Those green tabs are islands that are either owned already by the state or funded with public dollars. You see on the left, you see Sherman and Twitchell, that's owned by Department of Water Resources. Staten Island in the north is owned by the Nature Conservancy. The 4 green islands in the middle, Bolden, Webb, Bacon, and Holland, are now owned by Metropolitan Water District. And then the 3 islands in the yellow are islands where the owners have approached either DWR, Metropolitan Water District, or even ourselves, and expressed interest in selling their islands. So I think that's an indication that as costs increase to maintain these levees, as the pressure increases, as costs increase to pump water off these islands to keep them from filling up, and as the commodities that can be grown, a lot of this land is in corn, alfalfa, or pasture, are relatively lower value. The agriculture is not really paying the bills. We know from discussions with TNC and Met and DWR that to varying degrees, they're losing substantial amounts of funding. So we have a growing issue, a growing problem, and we need some solutions. So let's move on to some solutions. Next slide, please. Okay, but before we get there, one more slide on background. So what we know now from research is that we're seeing about, on average, 10 tons of carbon being volatilized per acre per year in the Delta. So if you remember that map earlier, on the edge of the Delta where you're getting to more mineral soils, you're probably getting 3 or 4 tons of carbon emission. And as you move into some of those red zones, we're seeing up to 26 tons of carbon. So think about that in terms of if you went out and you scraped 1.5 inches of soil off the top of an acre and weighed it, you're going to be pretty close to 15 tons of carbon. What that means at scale in the Delta is that we're producing over 2 million metric tons of carbon out of that 200-acre area in the Delta. Pretty substantial carbon emission. Just to put some equivalents around that to help people understand, that's the equivalent of about 500,000 vehicles. And I like this last one a lot because it's the equivalent of 1/4 of California's total plant-based agriculture. Now there's 17 million acres of arable land in California in production, and that's putting out about 8 million metric tons of carbon just through natural processes, a necessary cost of growing food and fiber. But in this one little dot, 200,000 acre dot, you're getting 2 million, or 1/4 of that total of 17 million acres. So what it just illustrates is that's why we have a great big hole in the ground, right? This is a very significant carbon source. The subsidence is a very significant threat to our water supply and our economy. And again, there's a real need to start to address this. Next slide. So now we're going to get to what are we doing to address it. I think you all are aware that we have a methodology now that has been approved by the American Carbon Registry back in 2017. And essentially what that allows any farmer, any landowner to do is resaturate their soil. They can allow a managed wetland or tule wetland to come on, and that actually helps with subsidence reversal as well. Or they can do rice cultivation, because you can cultivate rice in saturated soils. That stops that carbon emissions, stops the subsidence, and you get the value of the rice. Plus, through the methodology, you can quantify your emission reductions, get them verified, and then take them to market and get a revenue stream for that. So it's a pretty exciting time. We're just now finishing up the first third-party validation of 1,600 acres of wetland on Sherman and Twitchell Island, owned by DWR, in 2 separate projects. And so it is a very exciting time that we're moving this protocol forward. So we're working with public and private landowners, and this is just an area where it's really exciting. I mentioned the contract earlier that we're augmenting. We're going to work with the Nature Conservancy has some land they've converted to rice, as well as some land that they're looking at converting to managed wetland. A very prominent Delta farmer is looking at converting over 1,000 acres of land to rice. So the Conservancy is going to work with our team, and we're going to support the technical assistance to help them estimate their carbon emission reductions, develop their monitoring plans, and pay for the third-party validation so that they can then connect with the carbon market, sell credits, and get a revenue stream. It's also very exciting that Metropolitan Water District has received a large planning grant from Proposition 1 from Department of Fish and Wildlife. And they're going to be looking at taking one or more of those islands and putting it in what we call a whole island mosaic, where you might take the wettest land and make that managed wetland. You might surround that with some rice cultivation. You might surround that with some upland transition habitat and or some more permanent crops on the edge. So the idea being, how do we stop subsidence, stop carbon emissions, get revenue streams from those activities, and make an economically viable long-term management option for a whole island. We've been working with carbon financiers for quite a while who are actively engaged with the Googles and Apple and other big corporations that are buying carbon on the voluntary market. And they are very interested in seeing these type of credits in their portfolio because there's a connection to California, natural lands, wetlands in California, but also a connection to their water supply. So we're convinced that we can provide as much carbon, or we can sell as much carbon from the Delta as we can provide. We continue to seek funds because in bonds, preferably, or through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, to be able to help with providing offset or providing help to do land conversion, because land conversion to these practices is expensive and it's hard to come by the funding to actually do that. We were very encouraged that moving into bond discussions that we had an expectation that there likely would be some funding for this, but unfortunately with where we are currently, all discussions of bonds moving forward have really dropped off for now. And then I'm going to talk more about this in the next slide, but we're also talking with ARB because the next step is to move that voluntary market protocol into the compliance program space, which increases the value of the carbon significantly. So I just want to quickly run down the 3 meetings I had last week. Our team met with the California Air Resources Board Protocol Development Task Force. This is a task force that's been established by CARB to identify promising protocols that they want to consider adopting into compliance program. They're getting pressure to do that because we know that we need more protocols to be able to handle the amount of carbon reduction that we're envisioning into the future. It was an hour-long meeting. They were very excited to hear from us and hear the progress that we have made, that we have a protocol, that it's actually being used, and that we have pilot projects that are in the hopper. And so that was very encouraging. That evening, I met with the SMUD Board of Directors, and they actually contributed a quarter of the cost of developing the protocol. And so we provided an overview and update for them. Their board was just very excited about this. They were talking about the desire to jump in, develop pilot projects. Interestingly, they're interested in offsetting their current emissions, but also interested in looking at their past emissions, their historic emissions, and seeing how they can get to carbon neutral. So I envision that we will have meetings with them in the future to really look at what are the opportunities for pilot projects and see if we can bring them into the partnership and push to make more happen. The last meeting I had was I was referred by the Coastal Conservancy, which also was a funder of the protocol. And it was a woman who was a consultant to the Pew Charitable Trust. She's working on a report to the Pew about how they can get more engaged in blue carbon and delta carbon. And again, the meeting was just, everybody you talk to about this stuff gets sort of excited. They say this is a pretty amazing opportunity, and the economics make a lot of sense. So this woman was very interested in the process, indicated that we would feature prominently in her report to Pew, and that Pew would likely be reaching out to us for additional information and looking for ways that they might be able to partner as well. So again, there's really just been a groundswell of late, and we're looking forward to moving forward. Well, I think I have one more slide. Oh, I'm missing a good bit of that slide, James. Is that? I'm hoping that others can see more than just the voluntary column on the left.
Let me see what I was given.
Yeah, I've got compliance base case and compliance high case.
Okay, so it looks like everybody, but maybe I'll start to talk through it, James. I don't know if you can resolve the issue or if it even is an issue.
Yeah, let me know.
So this is just a nice slide of how the market is working right now. Okay, and let's focus on the voluntary market. If you're going to take 15 tons or credits to market per acre, you're going to put some in a buffer pool, and that really is sort of a hedge against, something happening, a reversal of some kind. And then you're going to take 11 credits to market. There's a price point currently on the voluntary market of about $7. That's going to result in about $77 per acre in revenue. You've got those verification costs that I mentioned that we're paying through our contract currently. And then you're going to get a net revenue stream of about $59. So this is sort of an estimate. I will say that the validation that we just completed for DWR put that number at about $62 net per acre. So that's really, thank you, James, that looks much better. So that's really important because right now DWR is leasing land back to farmers on Sherman and Twitchell Island at a value of a little over $30 per acre. On their land on Twitchell Island, they're getting more than that, closer to $60 per acre. So you can see that the carbon market right now can replace ag lease value. The importance of getting to the compliance program, which is that next column, is that the price point goes up to about $19 a ton when it's those big entities that are required to offset their emissions. So that gets us up to about $183 per acre net. That is much closer to the roughly $150 per net that you're looking at for corn or alfalfa or pasture in the Western Delta. That starts to look really profitable for individual farmers, not farmers that are leasing their land back. And then if we get to the high case, you're looking at about $300 per acre. The high case is really speculation, but it's well analyzed speculation by experts that the market will get to a $30 price point at some point in the relatively near future. So that's where farmers are going to look at their situation and say, I could make more money and stop increasing my risk by doing these practices. Also, just a note here that this is really just managed wetland value. If you look at rice value, you're going to get fewer credits and less carbon value because you have to drain that land in the spring and fall for planting and harvest, and you're going to get that volatilization in that period. So you're going to lose about 30%, 25 to 30% of that value, but you're also going to get a much higher commodity value on the order of $500, $600, $700 net after costs for growing rice. So there really is an opportunity here to maintain agriculture and gradually create an economic system where alternatives can really help us address these problems and keep it and actually improve the overall economic viability of the region. One last thing I'll say is that with all of the public land that we have currently, about 50,000 acres in this zone, we have a really nice opportunity to get a lot of this on the ground at scale and demonstrate that it works. Just mention again that MET is actually looking at a whole island mosaic. How do they create a system on a whole island that can really address all of these issues and maintain economic viability? So very exciting. And then the last slide, just like to end this one because as we know, situation's pretty important in the Delta. We've got a lot of infrastructure, a lot of communities out there in the Delta. The subsidence represents a threat to both those communities, that infrastructure, as well as our water supply. So I appreciate the opportunity to give you all an overview, and I hope you're all as excited to keep moving this forward as I am. Any questions?
I'm sure we have questions. Jim, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I am very excited. As I told you in my email, I'm very supportive. I think this is probably one of the most important things the Conservancy can do going forward. And apart from our grant programs, is going to have potentially the greatest impact, and it's an area where we can distinguish ourselves in terms of leadership in this area. The potential both on the impact on global climate change, contributing to the economy of the Delta, and doing it while supporting agriculture is, to me, a win-win-win, and it's something that it's essential we do. I had a couple questions. I've been reading recently about the value of credits declining and some difficulty in the carbon credit area, and I wonder how that would affect this, and what we might need to do to maybe engage on that issue. And then the second question is, our prior work towards allowing the Conservancy to own land, is that still an integral part of this process, and where are we on that if it is?
Sure. So starting with the first question, certainly all markets are down and all markets fluctuate, so that's absolutely an issue. The expectation of the compliance program is secure, and I can't remember the window, but there's always a tension in the carbon markets. They're still relatively nascent. There's concerns about whether or not it's the right way to offset carbon versus just a regulatory approach. So there are always going to be sort of a swirl of those issues. But I can say that both the voluntary market protocol developers as well as the compliance program are moving full scale ahead with the expectation that that it's a necessary effort, and we will soldier on. I think to the extent that our best add here is we have a very well developed protocol that's been through the whole process, and helping ARB consider adopting that into the compliance program is I think our real add to that larger picture. The state's also just focusing on how natural and working lands can help address the state's overall climate objectives, and so there's effort in trying to better define that as well. So, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to add to that. As counties, we're developing our own climate action plans, and this I think this fits in with our efforts along those lines.
To that extent, if you want to connect myself or others on our team to that group, just so they're aware how this might feature in that plan, we're happy to coordinate.
Happy to, yes.
Your second question about land ownership, I mean, I think that as I've discussed with many of you through the years, we are facing a situation in that Western Delta where, I think the state and the counties need to be thinking pretty critically about what happens in that zone. We hear hints and whispers periodically about some landowners, potentially walking away, and there may be abandonment issues. I think that's a broader conversation that we need to start to have. We were looking at ways to tee that question up before we went into not sequestration, but isolation. But certainly something that we need to be thinking about more broadly. I don't see any near-term issues specifically for us in terms of ownership, but something that we need to continue to focus on.
I think we just need to be ready for that eventuality if it occurs.
Yeah, I think it's a difference between thinking about it and planning for it or having it happen to us, I think, is the reality.
Exactly. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Dolly.
Yes, hi, thanks, Karen. So Campbell, I want to start on that last point and question that Jim just asked. When we have talked about land ownership, the other thing that we've talked about in terms of abandonment are all the different ships and vehicles that people have just left there in the Delta. And so I think maybe it's a broader conversation than just land ownership, but what is the responsibility of those previous owners for abandonment? And then what is the responsibility, or what would be the charge of the state towards the Conservancy or any other organization that took on islands or vehicles that were abandoned? And so I just want to remind us of that past conversation we've had over the last few years.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little distracted. I have a police helicopter circling nearby, and I can hear the speaker blasting, so I have no idea what's going on. One of the hazards of working.
They're coming to get you.
Yeah, it could be. Yes, Dolly, absolutely. And coincidentally, we had a meeting, Eric Vink and DPC and the Conservancy, with the San Francisco Estuary Program and their clean vessel program to try to think a little bit more about some of their efforts and past efforts to look at abandoned vessel issues and just clean boating issues in the Delta. And our intention there is to try to better coordinate and make sure that our objectives are aligned. Abandoned vessels has been a huge issue in the Delta. It's very problematic from a cost standpoint as well as a liability standpoint. Counties have programs. The State Lands Commission is involved. And heretofore, it's been, I think there's been some progress. There's been some pots of funding that have come to help, but it's a very challenging one. And I think it's really, for the most part, it's a funding issue. And so I think more work needs to happen there to just better articulate an overarching strategy and approach to those issues that recognizes there are many of us that have various levels of responsibility and can affect it in different ways. But it really does come down to the resources to be able to really address those problems. And I think you're right, absolutely. It's much broader than just land management.
Okay, great, thank you. To get back to the more specific topic about carbon management, though, you and many other people that I've heard speak on this raise the crop of rice. Are there other viable crops out there that are as economically beneficial, I suppose, as rice, or would we be looking at strictly rice, or is that up to each individual farmer on how they want to designate their crops?
So, starting from the beginning of the question, what's really driving the subsidence is having the soil dried. So anything that you have to grow on dry soil is going to continue to subside and create the carbon emission. So the idea is you want to resaturate that soil. You want to flood the soil again. The protocol that's been established, I mean, there are relatively few crops that grow in water. So the protocol focused just on the managed wetland and the rice as the two main mechanisms. And those are the two that we're mostly aware of. But obviously, landowners have the choice to maintain their current practices. They have the choice to go to rice. They have the choice to go to managed wetland. I think it is important to recognize that because we continue to subside, we're actually burning through the peat. And we're seeing larger and larger areas in the Delta that are too wet to farm anymore anyway. So here are some options that you can take that land that's no longer productive and make it productive under these scenarios as well. But the basic idea is even if you grow crops where you're reducing the depth, they have a shallower root zone, you're reducing those carbon emissions, but you still have emissions and subsidence. So to really address that, you have to resaturate the land. Hope that helps.
Thank you.
Chairman Mitchoff, we have two comments. Catherine had her hand up first, and then Brian will follow, and then we have a public comment from OSHA MISERV.
Okay, Catherine, go ahead.
Thank you. Campbell, first of all, thank you for persevering on this. I sat with you through some very, very difficult meetings with some representatives of the Delta and the ag community, and trying to put something like this together is always a difficult process. So thank you for persevering and being such a champion for this idea. Second, though, one of the things we talked about in terms of conversion to growing rice is the investment that's required to prepare the land, to make the transition from traditional crops to rice. Is there any more discussion about, a grant program or some funding that would be available to help farmers who are interested in making the transition but perhaps don't have the ability to fund that conversion?
Yeah, that's a great question, and as I briefly mentioned earlier, we were working really hard to try to realize a significant source of funding for that very purpose in whatever way we could realize it. And the most likely opportunities were the existing bond discussions and then the greenhouse gas reduction fund. So those have, sort of evaporated, right? I mean, I think with the economic downturn, there's no discussions about bonds. But on a more encouraging note, there's been interest on the part of rice buyers in really looking at the Delta and even potentially offsetting some of those conversion costs. Just so everybody's aware, a landowner who's growing corn and they want to convert to rice, it's about $1,000 per acre to do the laser leveling, put in the water infrastructure, and that's on average. So the challenge has been that banks historically are not willing to lend that level of money to rice farmers. But rice buyers now are looking at the Delta, and the main reason they're looking at the Delta is that they're concerned about losing rice land in the upper valley to more permanent tree crops. So they want to make sure that there's a sufficient rice market in the state. So my understanding is they've had some conversations with potential rice growers, and they're willing to help offset those. And if you're offsetting those costs, then it does pencil out economically, and the banks are more willing to lend. So it appears that we're sort of narrowing that gap between comfort level with lenders and moving. The other issue there is that the infrastructure for rice really doesn't exist, but that's a bit of a chicken and egg issue, because once you have enough production, then people will invest in the infrastructure that's necessary. So anyway, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, James, you were very good in telling me who was all waiting. So
Brian's next, and then OSHA Messerv after Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Campbell, great presentation. Seems like some really exciting opportunities here. Wondering if you could share the PowerPoint presentation with all of us. I'd really like to share that with a few folks back at the agency just to educate them on the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. It's posted. You can simply download it from the posting there. And just will let you know, Brian, that I've made presentations to Amanda Hansen as well as Wade and Tom and Nancy. So they're pretty aware, but it's certainly it's always good to refresh, and so appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm gonna allow OSHA Messerv to talk, and they should be able to unmute themselves now. OSHA.
OSHA, we're not hearing you.
Okay, how about
there
now?
You go. There you go.
All right, magic. This is OSHA Messerv, and I'll make my comments on behalf of local agencies of the North Delta, which is a coalition of reclamation districts in the North Delta that I work with a lot of Delta entities and that are conducting farming in one way or another and working on maintaining the islands for that future use. I just, I did get an opportunity with Fritz Beckman to meet with Campbell a couple months ago, back when we did meetings. And I think that was somewhat helpful in trying to understand, where the Conservancy in this program is headed. I think I have some concerns about the way in which it's being marketed, to use scare tactics like Mr. Ingram just did, to say that we're in danger of losing water supplies for 27 million people for 36 months, and that's a reason to do this program. I don't think it's correct. That's not, I don't think, a widely accepted estimate of outages, and that fails to take account of the opportunity and that we are maintaining our levees in the Delta, and that would prevent such outages from happening. And of course, looking at the Conservancy's strategic plan, its mission is supposed to be, one of them is to promote agriculture and economic enhancement. So I think it's really important that that be kept in mind as the Conservancy moves forward on this carbon project, which I personally, I don't oppose, and I don't think the people I represent oppose it, but the way that it's being promoted, I think, does pose some dangers, and I think it would be helpful, and this is what the meeting I had with Mr. Ingram was about, and I don't think we made the progress that I would have liked to see in terms of adjusting the marketing for this to be more sensitive to the needs of Delta farmers. There's, I think that it's appropriate that this is focusing on the public lands, and obviously, but there are private landowners out there as well, and when these figures are put out in terms of, 500,000 cars and 2 million tons and these kind of things, These are very rough estimates. They have not been vetted. They are not facts. They are based on, I believe, I think there were, I'm sure Campbell could correct me, but I think there were 6 sites, and there was a range of about 23 down to 3 tons of carbon dioxide per acre per year in the sites they tested. And then the numbers that were put on that slide of the carbon emissions quantified are based on that. So it's really important to, I think, caveat these kind of numbers, because the last thing Delta farmers need is another albatross on their backs, a target to say, oh, you're emitting more carbon, you're emitting 1/4 of California's carbon emissions. I don't think that's true. I think more, and if, these projects, these pilot projects go forward, it will be helpful because they will generate more data, and perhaps eventually we would get to the point where we would have kind of a lookup table where we could look at the location and the crop types and the soil types and, and actually have a pretty good idea of what's being emitted. But I think it's really important to, I think, be a little more sensitive to the overall mission of protecting agriculture in the Delta. And in addition, it is great to, and I support trying to find ways to, create economic value in the Delta. But if we go to something that does not create a crop, like the wetlands, that doesn't have multiplier effects, and that has, is not as positive as creating a crop. So, and it may be that there's certain areas of the Delta that are appropriate for that, but I think it's really important to talk about the specific regions of the Delta and the specific ownerships rather than being very broad brush about how this applies. So, and I think just the last thing I'll say is that, I think more interaction is needed with, local agencies, local farmers, and the, 5-county farm bureau and the county farm bureaus and probably the counties. So in order to create something that's a program that everyone can get behind it and nobody's feeling damaged by it or feeling like it's going to create ammunition that's going to be used against the Delta and against the long-term viability of agriculture in the Delta, which the Conservancy is supposed to be promoting to the extent it can. Obviously, we're limited by, the reality of the situation. But, I just don't think that last slide showing the road going into the water, that's not the whole Delta, and that's not the future that we're looking for. So I think there's some adjustments that could be made to this program to better match the Conservancy's mission and match up with what Delta farmers and the groups supporting farmers want to do in the Delta. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
Yes, we have a Justin Fredrickson that has his hands raised, and that will be followed by Michelle.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Justin, I'll be allowing you to talk. You can unmute yourself now.
Hello.
Hi, Justin. We can hear you.
Morning.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, can you all hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We can. Hold on 1 second. Shoot.
Yes, Justin, we can hear you.
So, hi, can you hear me?
Justin, we can hear you.
Okay. So yeah, my name's Justin Fredrickson. I'm with the California Farm Bureau Federation, and I'm going to echo a few of the points that Ocean was making and add in maybe a few others. Campbell, I was listening to you talk about the meetings you've had and with the ARB and with the Coastal Commission and with SMUD and the Pew Trust and all of these folks. I also looked at the public lands strategy that you all did, where I was looking at the stakeholders and all of the folks in charge of those public lands. Many of them were listed. What I'm not seeing is where the outreach to the farming community has occurred and where to the private landowners. And I think that's an area that definitely needs some development to make this a complete conversation. Someone used the term carbon management. The other piece of greenhouse gas controls is of course methane probably a couple of other gases that I'm not sure I could name them for you, but I know carbon and methane are two of them. Methane is an important one. It's actually worse greenhouse gas by far than carbon. And one of the things that they found happens with tules that die every year and decay. So there's like a layer of decaying tules underneath the ones that are growing, is they emit methane. And so I would hope that whatever protocols are being looked at, whether they're voluntary or regulatory compliance based, that they are looking at the balance of methane and carbon, because and then there's also a study out there. I think the gentleman's name is Hemi something like that, who's done
Hemis.
Right, where so you know what I'm talking about, where it shows that it can take decades, many decades, to get to a point where you're at a break point where you're starting to see positive greenhouse gas reduction. So those are things that obviously I think will need to be worked through, and I assume would have to be worked through in developing a protocol for compliance purposes. I would certainly hope so anyway. And then let's see, when you look at the area that you're talking about a third of the Delta, a lot of that is in public hands. It sounds like some of it's in negotiations of being potentially acquired as well, but it's still about a third of the Delta. And when you take into account the recent news of the eastern alignment on the other part of the Delta that's not in that area, if you're a Delta farmer, that looks pretty scary, or anyone in the community living in the Delta. It looks like the crosshairs just basically engulf the entire Delta. And to have something like this going rapidly down the tracks, and to not yet had the the conversations with the folks in those communities is I think problematic. So let's see, other things that I think levies. What's going to happen to the levies? Are the economics going to work out such that those levies are going to be maintained over time, et cetera, et cetera? That's another important conversation to have. And then it would just need to be science-based throughout all of this. I think the pilots, like OSHA said, are going to help to firm up the science. And then I think that, Campbell, I think it would be great if this could be collaborative and in partnership with farmers and private landowners and communities in the Delta, and not a top-down type dynamic. I think that's the way it would work best, and could work well in some areas. I mean, as you point out, there's a huge laboratory of publicly owned lands, and not that many public pilot projects to date covering very much acreage. So I would say first build out some of that, get the science firmed up, get the protocols firmed up, get the economics firmed up, and then maybe this becomes a thing. But it's a little premature to say, let's retire a third of the Delta or something right now, whether that's the intent or not. It's scary to the landowners. So I'd ask you, please come out and talk to the farm bureaus, the Delta Caucus farm bureaus, talk to the landowners themselves. I don't know if you have landowners who are on your board. Ask them. Go to the DPC, talk to the commissioners there. Talk to the Flood Association. Talk to the water agencies, South, Central, and North. And let's get a conversation going. The type of mosaic that you're talking about that Met's looking at it apparently, where you look at what's going on in each specific area. Does it make sense to have a conventional crop in one area and maybe some rice in another, and maybe tules in another? I think probably so, but the devil's in the details. So, thank you. Sorry to ramble on, but I think it's important to raise the issue, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, James. Is there someone else I thought you said?
Yeah, we have another hand raised, Michelle, and then we actually added another hand, Zelke. I'll unmute Michelle and allow her to talk.
Hi, I'm Michelle Leinfelder-Miles. I'm a farm advisor with the University of California Cooperative Extension. I do research in the Delta, working with local farmers, and then our mission is to work with communities to do outreach on the research that we're doing. My question is whether the Conservancy or some other organization has looked into having the implementation of rice, so the land preparation costs, get worked into the CDFA Healthy Soils program. The CDFA has implemented a program that it's an incentives program for farmers to help implement practices that reduce greenhouse gases. I don't believe that rice farming is part of that program. You have to implement certain practices that are prescribed within the program in order to get that incentives funding. And I just thought that that might be a way to help find some cost share funding for growers who may look to do that land preparation work that Campbell mentioned could be upwards of $1,000 an acre.
Yeah, if I can I just respond to that really quickly, Karen? Is that appropriate? No, just yeah, really appreciate that, Michelle. And in addition to reaching out to a number of private farmers in the Delta through the last several years, we've been reaching out to California Department of Food and Agriculture to try to get them to adopt the resaturation of peat soils as a practice within the Healthy Soils program. And we're coming up to their next iteration of new considerations. So we will be trying to engage on that. And I think it's a great point. It's a very robust program. And if we get this practice adopted into that program, it would be very beneficial. Thank you.
And James, I heard you say we have another comment.
Yeah, from a D. Zalecki. I'm gonna unmute them. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is David Zaleka. I'm president of Conservation Farms and Ranches, which manages Staten Island for the Nature Conservancy. And I'd like to, first of all, thank Campbell and his team for helping with some of the carbon marketing stuff that he mentioned earlier, that we're working with Steve Deverall, Hydrofocus, to try to get the carbon market established for our conversion from corn to rice. We're having our second crop of rice on 350 acres on Staten Island. And we're also in the process of converting another 650 acres to rice this year. And we want Staten to really be that lab where we want to open up our books of what these conversions cost. And we're also working with Hydrofocus, measuring the impact on emissions, both methane and carbon. We have instruments out in these fields, both on the corn fields and in the rice fields. And so we're really excited about, and we've had a really good crop last year, and we're hoping to have another good crop this year. It is expensive to convert over to rice, and it takes all kinds of new equipment, that converting from corn to rice. There is also, I think, one of the things that that we should start looking at is water quality impacts. What are, a lot of the runoff off of these agricultural projects ends up in the rivers. And so it would be really good for the Conservancy to not only look at reversing subsidence and reducing carbon output, but also looking at water quality issues in the Delta. And I think the economic stuff is positive if you look at rice or wetlands in isolation. But also, I think the multiplier that OSHA and others have mentioned, that kind of larger economic impact to the economy. And I think there are some positive ones when you're bringing birders or recreation or hunting that you could look at, but also just looking at what the cost of the transition is and what potentially the long-term economic impact would be in the Delta. We're really, the other project we're working on is conversion of 1,000 acres at the south end to wetlands. And we're discovering that's really complicated as far as getting permitting to do that work. We're not even sure we need CEQA as a private landowner. And so we're having to engage all kinds of legal folks to determine that. And if we do need it, we're having a hard time finding a sponsoring agency. And so those are, I think, the challenges moving into creating wetlands. And I think the other part is really we're working very closely with our mosquito control folks. But again, that's a constant challenge when you have wetlands and given all these, all these issues we're having with mosquitoes and diseases. And so it's, again, a place where the Delta Conservancy can hopefully help manage these different relationships and different permitting processes and challenges we're having. We're excited about the role Staten plays, moving very quickly towards these kind of mosaic land ideas that people have talked about, and we're really keeping track of all our costs and conversion costs and maintenance costs. We're hoping they will be helpful as the program grows further in the Delta. Thank you.
Thank you. James, do we have any other comments?
Nope, that was the last comment.
Okay. With that, I'm going to close this off. Obviously, a lot of interest and concern, and we will continue to work to try and address these concerns that are raised. Our next issue is the Delta Stewardship Council. I see that Amanda is listed, but I thought I saw something under chat that somebody else is doing it. James, or am I incorrect?
No, Amanda is doing it.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Amanda.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to update you all on Delta Stewardship Council activities. I have a few updates, and then I'm going to provide an additional update on the Science Action Agenda, which Eva Bush from the Delta Science Program presented about at your May meeting. She was going to do it, but she actually had to jump off for another meeting. So you get me, and I will try to answer any questions you all have regarding that. But just a few more general updates. First, the Delta Stewardship Council is meeting this Thursday. Campbell will be providing an update on Conservancy activities, and Eric Fink will be providing an update on Commission activities. There will also be a presentation by DWR and the Central Valley Flood Protection Board regarding an update to the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, and there is more information about that meeting on the Council's website. Next Tuesday, July 28th, is the third of 4 virtual discussions in preparation for a science needs assessment workshop scheduled for this fall. The last discussion on June 3rd included Campbell and focused on what decision makers might need to know in the future. This discussion next week will be a panel discussion with Louise Conrad from the Delta Science Program, Mike Chakowski with the United States Geological Survey, and Stephanie Fong with the Interagency Ecological Program on what science is needed to support future decision making and how their respective science programs are preparing for future changes and setting strategic research goals. So we've had really good participation in these discussions, and so I encourage you all, if you have an extra hour next Tuesday, to tune in and listen to that. And then I wanted to make you all aware that the current Delta lead scientist, John Calloway, completes his 3-year tenure this month. This is a joint position between the Delta Stewardship Council and the USGS. We've had a number of Delta lead scientists over the years, John, and then it's usually a 3-year tenure. Under John's leadership, the Stewardship Council has successfully conducted a proposal solicitation process in partnership with Department of Fish and Wildlife and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, funding Delta research as identified in the Science Action Agenda. Also have updated the Delta Science Plan, and he has supported efforts for structured decision-making and integrated modeling. Finally, John's leadership has really been instrumental in the Delta Science Funding and Governance Initiative process that we've been under for the past 1.5 years or so. So John will be resuming his duties as a professor in the Department of Environmental Science at University of San Francisco after serving his term. And then we're saddened to see John go. He's been wonderful to work with these last few years. We are excited, however, to be welcoming the new Delta lead scientist, Dr. Laurel Larson, who is an expert in hydroecology, landscape dynamics, complex environmental systems, and environmental restoration. She was appointed by the council on April 30th, and she has most recently served as an associate professor of the Department of Geography and Civil and Environmental Engineering at University of California, Berkeley. And so Dr. Larson will begin her tenure as Delta lead scientist in early September. So now I'd like to provide, as I mentioned, just an update on the Science Action Agenda process. Eva Bush, again, as I mentioned, from our staff, presented the kind of an overview of this process during your May Conservancy Board meeting. So I just want to give you a little bit of an update on our progress and mention ways that you can, that we invite you to continue to engage and provide input in this. So since March, so we did begin this process prior to your last board meeting. We have been conducting outreach to collaborative groups. And last month, we released a survey to capture input on the list of management questions and feedback on the current science action agenda, which we completed in, 2016, late 2016. Through this process, we've received management questions on climate change, invasive species, native fish, governance, water quality, and other topics. Most respondents in the survey were either very or somewhat familiar with the science action agenda and have been able to use the report, use the action agenda for creating partnerships and collaborations and to help inform research and monitoring, as well as helping to prioritize funding. So moving forward, all the management questions that we've been collecting are going to be compiled and evaluated using screening criteria that we've been developing. We'll be organizing them by theme, and then we're going to have a workshop on September 29th to further refine these questions. We encourage Conservancy board members and Conservancy staff to participate in the September 29th workshop. And we really do hope to use that time to, as I mentioned, refine and identify really the most pressing Delta management questions. And then the plan is to incorporate those into the science action agenda. The registration is currently open for that workshop. We encourage registering early because we will be sending out a little pre-workshop materials for attendees to read through and help them familiarize themselves with the process. And if you're unable to, if you were unable to complete the online survey that I mentioned, we are still seeking input through the end of this week. And so if you visit the council's website, there should be something on our very front page that will direct you to the survey. I can also, if you want to reach out to me as well, I can put you in touch with with Eva and others at the Stewardship Council if you have other comments or questions about the process. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions. If I don't know the answer, I will try and find an answer for you. Thanks.
Okay, I'm not seeing any raised hands. Do you, James?
Nope, we're clear so far.
Okay. Anybody in the public who wishes to comment on Amanda's report? Seeing none, we will now move on to Mr. Vink and the Delta Protection Council.
Great, thank you, Chair Mitchoff and Conservancy board members. Just a couple of items I'd like to give you an update on. The first is that the Commission continues its work on updating our economic sustainability plan for the Delta. This was a 2012 document that was mandated by the 2009 Delta legislation. And initially we updated the agricultural chapter. We've now completed those reports, and either the reports or summaries of reports, because some of these reports are highly technical in nature, will be posted to the Commission website, and we'll be sharing those with other entities, including the Delta Stewardship Council. The main note related to Delta agriculture is that it continues to evolve. The Delta is not dissimilar from the rest of California agriculture. There's a move toward higher value permanent crops. That's orchard plantings, primarily almond orchards, but there's also olive plants. I don't know if you call them olive orchards or groves, but there's olive plantings throughout the Delta. Of course, there's an increase in vineyard planting as well. We have a very successful wine grape industry in the Delta region. And the continued decline of lower value field crops, including corn and alfalfa. But those are some of the high points from that report. At the same time, we've embarked upon work to take a fresh look at the recreation and tourism chapter of the Economic Sustainability Plan. We just reported to our commission about focus groups that we conducted with different recreation and tourism, either providers or consumers in the Delta. That started pre-COVID and continued post-COVID, so it made for some interesting information gathered, but it's helping us to frame how we want to be talking about the update of that chapter. So stay tuned for further information. Moving on to the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta National Heritage Area, and I appreciate the update that Campbell provided earlier about the signs. We're working with our team on the components of our mandated management plan. That's something that we are required to prepare by federal legislation. We just executed our cooperative agreement with the National Park Service. It's really interesting how challenging it can be to complete something as simple as a cooperative agreement, but we've cleared that hurdle, and we are in receipt of the first slug of federal funding to help support the development of the National Heritage Area, and that all begins with the management plan. I expect that we'll be going out to stakeholders sometime in the fall with the first components of what will ultimately be included in the management plan, and we'll be seeking input from all at that time. And the other thing, it's just kind of a lead up to Carrie Buckman presenting after me, but in this round of Delta Tunnel planning, now called the Delta Conveyance Project, we're working much more collaboratively with both DWR and with the Design and Construction Authority. A lot of this is really due to the fact that they are working through a lot more of the engineering and design features that was not really a component of Cal Water Fix or BDCP that preceded it. So kudos to DWR and to the water contractors for their process, especially the Design and Construction Authority, what they call their Stakeholder Engagement Committee, where they're reaching out with more and more detailed information about the alternatives that they're considering and seeking input from a wide range of Delta stakeholders on what that particular location, what kind of challenges they would face if they're, for example, seeking to put a tunnel boring shaft on a particular piece of property. And perhaps that's something that Carrie will talk about in a little more detail. But we're just really appreciating the more collaborative approach to identify the potential impacts this go around of this iteration. We still don't like the project as it's been presented conceptually, but of course we're very keen to see what is presented in a draft environmental impact report, which we understand might be coming in early 2021. So that concludes my report, Madam Chair. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Leo?
Yeah, so hi, Eric. Thank you for your report. So I understand, as you've said, that the Delta Ag is moving towards more profitable and more permanent crops. That is a very good thing. I think it increases revenue. There's a flip side to that, and those are wildlife impacts and loss of significant habitat for birds and other animals as a consequence of that shift to permanent crops. So is the Delta Protection Commission addressing that issue as well? Or how is that issue being addressed?
Well, good question, Vice Chair Winternitz. And to date, most of the, I mean, when you look at the maps of where these new plantings are going in, they're still more at the periphery of the Delta. That might be in locations that feature, you know, important habitat for shorebirds, migratory waterfowl, other terrestrial-based species. We still have a lot of field crop production in the Delta. The overwhelming acreage of Delta agriculture is in field crops. By acreage, the top two crops are corn and alfalfa. Those are both very well suited for many of those species that I think you're referencing. So, you know, we'll want to keep an eye on it. It's great that the Conservancy funded a Prop 1 project, the Mellow Conservation Easement on the island right next to Staten Island that I'm blanking on at the moment. But anyway, thank you. Yes. So I mean, we would certainly encourage more of those type of projects because, you know, the best way to ensure that you don't make that conversion from a crop you favor to a crop you don't favor is to, you know, reach an agreement with the landowner and that you're compensating them for what they're foregoing there.
Thank you. I'd propose a establishing, well, formal communications between conservation organizations working in the Delta, such as the Mellow and the Nature Conservancy, and including the Delta Protection Commission and the Delta Conservancy, to at least sit down and start addressing these issues and helping the conservation organizations figure out what is being converted so that they can establish priorities and working together collaboratively to address these issues in a way that benefits everybody. I don't know that we have that yet, but that may be a good start.
Yeah, we'd really welcome that discussion. I mean, I think, you know, in terms of conserving lands in the Delta, I think we really, you know, we look toward the Conservancy as the lead Delta agency on that. If we can support that in any way, we're absolutely committed to the natural resources of the Delta, especially the terrestrial-based resources. And we understand the great benefit that the migratory birds, how important that component is to the overall Delta values and everything that we cherish in the region.
It is part of the heritage.
Yeah, yeah. I think we want to support that. In terms of taking the lead, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily the expertise that we particularly have on our staff, and I don't think we're really set up for that, but we want to be supportive of it for certain. But I appreciate you raising that point, Vice Chair Winternitz, and we stand ready to team up with the Conservancy and any others at any time on that.
Thank you, Eric.
We're happy to try to explore that issue, absolutely. And it goes all the way back to the restoration network that we had a long time ago that could be sort of re-energized and focus on that. Eric, I did similar question. You know, the questions that Leo has brought up and the economic multipliers there, are those somehow addressed or recognized, or will they be in the economic sustainability plan?
Well, the 2012 economic sustainability plan, was the agricultural analysis was a snapshot in time, and we've attempted to take a more current snapshot. We've been trying to perfect this long enough that we use 2016 data. That seems like forever and a year ago, but that's the most recent data we've used. We're fortunate in the Delta that we do have relatively contemporary crop land use data as a result of the work that Land IQ has done with Department of Water Resources, and really as a result of Department of Water Resources prioritizing those land use surveys. So I think we have that data now for 2017 for sure, and I think even for the 2018 crop year, and presumably they're working on 2019. Of course, we're right in the middle of 2020 right now. So anyway, we've revised the snapshot based on the 2016 data and did look at how that agricultural production moves through the ag economy and utilizing the multiplier effects, et cetera. It's a pretty, it's the basic level of analysis. It could certainly go a lot deeper if one wanted to about the economic impacts of that, but the high level run through of the input-output models is part of the report that we'll be posting to our website here imminently.
Thank you.
Okay, Campbell, I think it looks like I just got a message saying I'm in charge.
Okay, you're in charge, Leo.
Eric, thank you for your report. So did we ask for any public comment on that?
I think we did, but certainly doesn't hurt to just check one more time.
Is there any? James?
Doesn't look like anybody's had their hand raised.
All right, thank you. So let's move on now. Where are we?
We're on item number 13, Delta Conveyance Update by Carrie Buckman.
Thank you. Carrie, you have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. So as I wanted to provide some updates on where we are on Delta Conveyance. So to start with, talking through the CEQA process, we published the scoping summary report on July 10th. And so that report includes a summary of the process we went through for scoping, as well as a summary of all of the comments received. One of the most, I think, useful parts for people is that it also includes attachments that show all of the comment letters and the meeting transcripts from the scoping meetings. As a reminder, we had 8 meetings that had 735 attendees, so we have quite a few comments in the transcripts. And we also have about 850 letters. So that's all documented in that report that's available on our website. Also for CEQA, we're working to continue the process. So we are working to incorporate the input we receive from scoping to start formulating alternatives and work on describing the environmental setting and developing methodology that we'll be using for analyzing impacts. And one note on that is that this afternoon, as Eric mentioned, the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority, or DCA, has a stakeholder engagement committee, and that is meeting this afternoon at 3 o'clock. And at that meeting, I'll be providing an update about the alternatives formulation process and where we are, so that may be interesting to people as well. It's a virtual meeting and anyone can attend, and the information is on their website. Okay, so next, a NEPA update. So for the Delta Conveyance project, we do not have a federal project proponent. You know, there isn't a federal agency that is working collaboratively with us to partner and implement the project. So for NEPA, we'll be having one of the regulatory agencies complete the NEPA process. So we went through the process to formally engage the Corps, and the Corps has been talking to the other agencies, and the Corps has sent us a letter that they are going to prepare an environmental impact statement. So they are working on a notice of intent that they're planning to issue later this summer, which will start the scoping under NEPA. They're also looking, I think, this is all still in development, but they're looking at a separate environmental document. So rather than having a combined EIS and EIR, it will be 2 separate documents. But we know that that can be kind of frustrating to reviewers. So we're trying to do our best to align schedules. So that may shift our schedule a bit. We're still trying to work through that, and I should have updates in the next month or 2 on that schedule change. And then the last item on my list is I wanted to update people about soil investigations. So we completed an initial study in mitigated negative declaration, and we finalized that document as well as the notice of determination regarding new soil investigations in the Delta. Some of the sites in that document require additional permitting that is still underway, so it's not like they can all be started right away, but we are looking at starting a small subset of investigations on publicly owned property this summer, as well as working on trying to get temporary entry permits to do further investigations. One other thing is that there are some investigations that were subject to lawsuits under previous efforts that have been resolved, and so those are starting actually next week. So there is some investigation under those previous efforts that is also going on this summer. And I think that those are my updates, if there are any questions.
Any questions for Carrie? See none. Any public questions for Carrie?
No hands raised.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So now we move to Eco Restore update by Charlotte. Charlotte Biggs.
Good morning.
Hey there. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi, how are you? Sure. So thanks for having me back. I wanted to just provide a quick update on the Eco Restore initiative this morning. So last time when I was here, I mentioned that this spring marks the 5th anniversary of the Eco Restore initiative. So as the Conservancy is turning 10, we are turning 5. And so because Eco Restore is really a multi-agency initiative, we really celebrate this milestone with the Conservancy as our partner. You've been our partner, you know, in this initiative since the beginning. So I just wanted to say that up front. And to mark the occasion, I mentioned last time that we are putting together a fact sheet that has been released. and it's really highlighting our accomplishments over the last 5 years and a bit of a look ahead on what's to come, some of the areas that we're going to be focusing on. I think Jessica might have sent that around to you all. I know she asked me for it, and if not, it's on our website and it's available. But I wanted to give you kind of a more, still very brief, but a different update today on some of the progress that we've made just in the last couple of months this year, since the COVID era, some things that have been implemented and some progress that we've been making. So I'm just going to go through a couple of projects. And if you want to know any more about these, we can brief you on them, and we have more information on our website as well. So in May this year, we broke ground on Whales Belly Wetland Restoration Project on Sherman Island, and that's in Sacramento County. And this is really a pilot project for the Delta Carbon program that Campbell was speaking about earlier. This is a state-owned land, it's DWR's site, and so this really represents, I think, a major step forward for the carbon sequestration projects on state lands. And so we just want to recognize the Conservancy's leadership on developing the carbon protocol and your partnership on this effort and helping us move it forward. We're excited to see construction starting, and I know the team has been very busy working on that. And Campbell also helped us with a press release that we put out in May. So thank you again for that support. In June this year, we got some monitoring information from the Tule Red tidal habitat restoration project in Sassoon Marsh. And it was good news. We, longfin smelt specifically, have been repopulating on the Tule Red tidal wetland just about 6 months after construction. Construction wrapped up on that site back in, I think it was last September, end of September, October. And so we're already seeing some of the native fish returning to the site and using it, so that's good news. And I think we put on our website some articles that were published about that as well. And then looking ahead right now to just in a few weeks, we're getting ready to break ground on the Lower Elkhorn Basin Levee Setback Project, which is in Yolo County, just adjacent to the Sacramento Weir. So this is a multi-benefit project. It's really being done for flood control, but it also includes habitat, about 900 acres of floodplain habitat as we set back the levee. So this is very exciting to be able to do a project that is both addressing these really critical needs in the area. And so DWR has selected a contractor for that effort, and they are starting to mobilize. So in the next 2 to 4 weeks or so, we're hoping to formally break ground on that project. The last thing I wanted to mention is that in September, we're hoping that Wings Landing tidal wetland restoration project will start construction. That is part of the fish restoration program developing Delta smelt habitat, and it's in the Sassoon Marsh. And so we're hoping that we're working with a contractor on that effort, and they are getting their final permits and hoping to break ground this year. So that's really our update for right now for 2020. I think even in these times, we've been able to make some progress. We're not doing groundbreaking events or anything like that these days, but we are trying to do videos and press releases and things like that to get the word out. And again, we have updated information on our DWR EcoRestore website. All these efforts are kind of linked there. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those now, or we can connect later as well.
Okay.
Thanks, Leo.
Thank you, Charlotte. Any questions for Charlotte from the board? None. Any public comments?
No hands raised currently.
Thank you, James. So that moves us to Campbell, right?
Yes.
Potential agenda items.
Okay, so first I want to remind everybody that our next meeting is actually in October for our new schedule. This allows us to avoid the month of November as well as December, and gives us a little bit of extra time between this meeting and next. So the two items that I've just highlighted there are, as promised earlier in this meeting, we will have a full Nutria update. We'll look at that program top to bottom, all the partnerships, all the activities, and all the funding in the future, and try to make sure that we have an eye towards Leo's question about, you know, what population effect are we seeing and are hoping for at this point. We briefly mentioned earlier that it's possible that we might have a Prop 68 project that is ready and has a recommendation for the board to consider. Don't want to make any promises there, but that is a possibility. And then beyond that, just open to any suggestions from the board about other items that they would like to see, maybe from conversation today, brought back moving forward. Last thing I'll mention is that we don't have currently any pressing issues that would warrant a program and policy subcommittee meeting next month, but we are certainly open to that if board members have issues that they would like to tee up for discussion in that venue as well. So you can let us know now or in the very near future, because we do have reporting requirements for noticing that meeting, so we would have to do that relatively soon.
Yes, in terms of a discussion in the future, it wouldn't have to be immediate, but I'm wondering, with your experience of everyone working from home, whether we consider changing how we operate. Do we continue to have everybody in one office, or do we have an option that would include more people working from home? Probably not everybody working from home. And I know a number of private businesses and state agencies are going through this same process. So at some point, when you're ready, it would be good to have that discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are certainly thinking about that. I know that the Resources Agency in general is thinking about that as well. I mean, we're really in a new world here, and we have a lot of potential opportunity and cost savings opportunities. So yes. I'm not sure when we'll be ready to do that, but absolutely.
Right. Well, no rush, but I think it's a discussion to be had. And, the emphasis on climate change in our earlier discussion, I think, is one that's important across the board. And I'm realizing this in this pandemic, because when you're in the middle of a crisis that is causing serious health consequences and death, is not the time to plan for it. The time to plan for it is way ahead of time. And the climate change crisis is more long-term, but probably bigger and more important. So I think everything we do should be informed by that. That's why I was so excited by the earlier efforts on the subsidence and whatever we can do there.
Thank you.
Any other comments for a future agenda, for our October agenda items from board members?
Campbell, it is obviously not feasible for us to go to any sites that we have either, that we'll see come to fruition. But is it feasible, as projects are implemented, we can see via a video of what we have created, just to keep us connected to those Prop 1 projects that we started down the road with 5 years ago?
I think that's a great idea, and without directly volunteering Aaron, my guess is that Aaron would probably love to go out and do a little videography and share. We'll see how we can get that done for something next meeting.
Great suggestion. Any other comments? Campbell, I have one. Just keep carbon on the list. We've received some public comments. I think some important public comments on that. We may have discussions in the intervening period. If you have, it'd be good to know about those and what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always a part of the executive officer's report, but it is absolutely. We will keep you posted on everything as it develops.
Okay. Thank you.
Appreciate your interest in that.
Any public comment?
No hands raised.
Thank you. So with that, I guess the meeting's adjourned. Do we need to vote to adjourn, or do we just establish adjournment?
You just drop the gavel, call it adjourned.
Thank you very much, everybody, for this meeting, and the staff, Campbell. It was a great meeting.
Great. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.
Goodbye.